How do you find your hobby mojo when it just kind of disappears into thin air? Hey guys, welcome back to Proper Chuffed. My name's Hilton and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. That is half the fun of this, isn't it? Before we begin, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back my friends. It's good to see you again. So if you're keeping up with the updates on Dun Roman, you'll know that I have recently taken a bit of a break and come back after about a month or so off as I've got into a new job and kind of got into the groove of things. But I've come back to Dun Roman feeling a little bit confused and slightly lost, to be honest with you. The northern side had so much purpose, I had so much drive and focus to get it done, and I think many of you will probably say, Hilton, you did it too quickly. But when that creative bug kind of grabs you, it's very hard to slow down. And as I found myself approaching the southern end, particularly after the croft, I was kind of left scratching my head as to what to do next. It's not that I don't have the vision for it and where it's going to go, but something somewhere inside me just went meh. And I feel like this kind of happened last time and I made a lot of excuses about the original Dun Roman and I was like, you know, it doesn't make sense in this space. I don't have that problem here. I've got ample space and it's really great. But something was lost in this process and I couldn't really quite place where it was. It may have been the fact that I spent pretty much an entire week just making pine trees and then realizing that my pine trees are absolutely awful and it really did kind of break me down a little bit. I may or may not have gone to bed crying at one point. I didn't do that, don't worry. My point is sometimes you hit a weird little roadblock in this hobby. And to be honest with you, this is the first time in like 2 years that I've actually hit a point where I'm like, I don't know what to do. And that's half the reason I came up with my side project of Archeur and Tarbet. And I'll be starting on that very soon because I do think I need somewhat of a fresh perspective, especially given the direction that Dun Roman is going right now. So I do have a relatively big piece of news to share with you guys. And that is that I'm actually not going to be here in the next couple months because Annie and I have bought a house, which means that all of this is going to go. Go where, you ask? I don't know. Do I take Dun Roman with me? Do I attempt to sort of break it up into the sort of modular design that I had initially intended for it to be? Or do I actually sell Dun Roman as it is and start again in the new place? There's a lot of questions there, and I know a lot of you would say keep Dun Roman. And to be honest with you, I've put a lot of time, effort and love into it and I don't think I'm quite ready to say goodbye to it yet. However, the future is bright because the new house is definitely going to be model railway ready at some point and it's going to be pretty impressive, I hope anyways. Anyways, back to model railway mojos, right? I find myself making all sorts of very strange little excuses as to why I can't be creative again with Dun Roman. I think one of the major ones that I kept coming up with was I keep feeling like I'm repeating the same sort of scenery. Bushes, grass, trees, and of course that's, you know, the West Highlands. It kind of looks like that. So I can't really lean into that as an excuse, but it is a reality. I'm kind of like getting tired of doing the same sort of repetition of scenery, hence the craft because, you know, it was something slightly different. And I'm kind of just trying to get over the line so that I can get to the distillery because I've got such cool plans for how that's going to go. So finishing the Southern Hill may not entirely happen right now because I think what I need is a little bit of a creative refresh. However, today, we're finally getting somewhere. However, today I really want to take you through my thought process of how I sort of start finishing up the Southern Hill as it stands. I'm going to take a bit of a break from it and move on to the distillery next week. But as it stands, let me bring you up to speed. This week we're reforesting the southern section of Dun Roman. I'm starting small, plugging a few small visual gaps and tidying up the footpath to the distillery. The first job is the footpath along the line to the distillery. That path needed to feel damp and used, so I'm stippling AK's muddy ground texture on with a small, firm brush. Moving up to the hill above the siding, it looked a little bit bare, so I'm adding a few extra shades just to roughen it up. I'm using static grass in a burnt red tone. It gives a lovely contrast against the greener base and really helps break up the monotony. To improve this, you can vary the pile heights like 2mm and 4mm mixes. Those are both great. Keep placement irregular. Nature doesn't do straight lines, so neither should you. Next, I'm moving up to the big hills in the background. These taller spots that just sit above the southern section. These are almost invisible from most viewing angles, and I've learned my lesson after painstakingly detailing the northern hills. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But basically, no one really sees them, so this time I'm keeping things a little bit more restrained. I'm using Woodland Scenic's alpine bushes to create loose, natural dapples of texture, just enough to suggest pockets of heather and coarse growth down the line. I'm not aiming for perfection here. It's like more about impression and tone in the background. The goal is to give the hillside a bit of life without really overworking it. I also add a few of these textures within the hollow of the whiskey line itself. These small touches really tie that section into the rest of the landscape going up the hill. It's a little bit overgrown, a little bit wild, like nature's starting to creep back in and around those track areas. On top of all this, I've been experimenting with some mossy textured netting, which I spray painted a dark earthy brown to act as underbrush. I draped this flock across the hillside and gave it a generous mist of hairspray before sprinkling on some flock. Almost instantly, it comes kind of alive. It's like a dense, bushy layer of mixed greens that work beautifully as a forest floor. I'm constantly trying new techniques, and it always feels like a bit of a thrill when a vague idea actually springs to life like this. Even up close, it looks surprisingly convincing. And for anyone modeling more rugged or uneven terrain, this approach might be worth a go. It adds a nice bit of chaos and depth without needing too much precision. Another great way that I've found that breathes a lot of life into barren static grass is by giving them a light mist of hairspray and then peppering over a fine green flock. What this does is introduce small variations in both texture and color. You start to get that layered, uneven look that happens naturally in the wild where no two patches of grass are ever quite the same. It breaks up the monotony of uniform static grass fibers and gives the impression of smaller weeds, mosses, or different kinds of grass species creeping around. What I particularly like about this technique is how versatile it can be. It works really nicely along embankments, near fences, and around structures where grass could naturally look a bit more unkempt or shaded. And because it's such a forgiving method, you can kind of build it up until it feels right in your eyes. From a distance, it just gives your scene that lovely sort of realism to it, and up close it rewards you with subtle textures and tones that just make the ground feel a little bit more alive, if you know what I mean. Now let's move on to my trees. Oh boy, me and my trees. I swear we've got like a love-hate relationship at this point. Mostly hate, I'm not going to lie. Despite the fact that I've now built somewhere around 30 to 40 of these things, I still wouldn't call myself an expert, not by a long shot. Every single time I sit down to make a new batch, I try something slightly different, and every single time I end up looking at them thinking, yeah, we're still not there, are we? From a distance, they're fine. They do the job, they look like the trees that I want, and they fill up the space. But up close, can't help but feel a little bit miffed at the final result. The amount of time that goes into making each one of these is staggering, and yet I still find myself staring at them thinking, right, what went wrong this time? This next batch in particular came out looking a little bit too light, so I gave them a quick dusting with the airbrush in a darker green to bring some depth back into them. It helped a bit and added some life and variation, but still not quite what I'm after. Regardless, I soldier on because one day, I'll crack it. And to those of you who've kindly sent me your own tree making tutorials and how-tos from YouTube and the likes, trust me, I've tried them, I've watched them all. Every day is a school day in this hobby, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that even failures like this add character, but I'll get it right one day, I promise. With my patience running thin, I begin the long process of planting these trees. And let me tell you, it's not quite as straightforward as I'd imagined. The wire mesh under the solid plaster base is absolutely unforgiving, and every time I think I've got a good spot, the drill bit catches or the trunk just goes in at some weird angle. More often than not, the trees have a mind of their own. They twist, they lean, they uproot themselves halfway through, and before long, I'm having a full-on debate with a bit of foliage. It's actually ridiculous. Still, this is a game of patience. Slowly but surely, I start getting them to cooperate. I want this entire section to feel wild and overgrown, as though nature's taken back over. No tidy parkland, just proper highland forest. So I'm packing this space absolutely full to the brim, filling every nook and cranny with trees of varying heights and shapes, even though each one fights me along the way. The effect as they start to come together is definitely worth it. Now, we can't just have pines, right? The woodland needs a bit of variety, so in come the seafoam trees. The beauty of these little wonders is that they not only bring a huge sense of depth and realism to the scene, but they also serve another rather important purpose: hiding some of my more hideous handmade creations. It's a total win-win, a dense forest and a bit of camouflage for my earlier attempts. There's really no strict method to placing these. It's a case of trial and error and a fair amount of stepping back to squint at things until they look just about right. I shift trees around, adjust their spacing, tweak the angles, rinse and repeat until I find that happy medium where everything just kind of works together. It's one of those moments in modeling where instinct does the heavy lifting, I guess. You can really see now how all the added trees help tie it all together. They complement that dense ground foliage quite beautifully, adding a real nice sense of depth. Many of you mentioned in my last video when I was working on the craft that it would make sense to have a fence running along the line between the rails and the road. I took that feedback to heart, so for this section I've employed a Pico farm fence along the full length, making absolutely sure no stray Highland sheep can wander onto the track. I primed the fence first and then painted it a very natural organic brown to help it sort of blend in with the surrounding scenery, and I think this really helps define the boundary, and hopefully you all feel better about it too. Another thing that's been bugging me is the actual croft area itself. It's always felt a little bit too exposed and kind of lacks in character. So to fix this, I continued my reforesting work, adding a few more trees so that the area feels slightly denser and a bit more natural, but still leaves those important viewing angles clear. So one of the main things about particularly this section here where the line branches off to go up to the distillery and sort of head through the trees and the meander up there is I actually needed to remove some of the trees from the northern meander, the Bubri meander as I called it previously, which it still is, it hasn't changed its name or anything. But I had to remove some trees there because I found myself trying to film there and really struggling to get shots through the pine trees. So I probably overestimated just how many trees I needed on that side. So what I've done is I've uprooted a lot of those pines and moved them over here to make this all feel a lot more sort of closed up. This is a section of track that has always looked really weird to me, and I wanted to make it look a little bit more natural, and I think I've achieved that now, including a lot more trees, making it look a lot more dense and quite thick, and I think it does the job, to be honest with you. With the help of a few more of my leafy friends, the cooperative types, I've been able to shelter it nicely, giving it a more believable, natural feel. I've done the same around the tunnel mouth as well, and I think that these additions really tie the scene together now. It feels a lot more like a dense highland landscape rather than the bare, exposed set of tracks that it was previously. So as far as the southern end goes, and as I've run out of steam on particularly these scenics, I think it looks pretty good at this point. Now, you may notice that I am now using a slightly different mouse. This is the Roku Z21 Start system. This has been kindly lent to me by my good friend Brinko while I wait for my ESU ECOS to arrive, hopefully within the next month or two. But this is in its stead because I've already sold my other Z21. Unfortunately, I do have a solution to run and drive some trains. I've also acquired a new Class 50. Now this is not the Acura scale Class 50, it's actually an older Hornby, and to be honest with you, super impressed with the quality of this model. I recently installed HM7000 with a Class 50 profile and found that there was space enough inside the chassis that I could get a really big speaker included inside it. And to be honest with you, it really does the trick. And I'm very happy to finally have a 50 on the line. You'll never guess what I paid for this locally. £25, and it's absolutely rock solid. I tell you what guys, if you're looking for second-hand 00 models, it's maybe worth visiting South Africa just to see what's on the market down here, because there are occasionally some very rare and well looked after steals. I'm super happy to have this 50 up here in Dunroman. I know that they did do a little bit of a tour in Scotland last year? No, the year before. I can't remember, I think it was last year. So not totally out of its area of operation in the sort of heritage sense. So, and yeah, I mean, it sounds absolutely bombing. It really, really is quite a deep throaty sound profile that Hornby have produced. Obviously, given if you put the right sort of speaker inside it. So really impressed with this and really happy to add it to the collection. This is 50020 Revenge. Another recent acquisition of mine from the local South African market is this Hornby Class 73. And you're probably thinking, Hilton, what are you doing with a 73? However, if you know your Highland traction, you'll know what this can become. And I'm looking forward to, hopefully in the next month or two, being able to convert one of these into a 73.9. This will be a first for me, so should be kind of interesting to see how it all turns out. But anyways, stick around for that. That should be a really fun project and something kind of different. So going forwards, and hopefully I suppose within the next week or so, I'll begin actual progress on the whiskey distillery itself, which still hasn't been named. I have quite a few great suggestions. However, here is your last chance to name the Dunroman distillery. Really looking forward to seeing that come to life. I'm looking forward to finding that mojo again. I'd love to know how you find your hobby mojo when you're kind of down and out of the game a little bit and you've kind of just lost that energy and that feeling, because it does happen to all of us. As always, I just want to thank my Westies. You guys have gone above and beyond to support me, and I really, really do appreciate that. And I can't thank you enough for being part of the gang. It really does mean the world to me. That is all I have for you this week. And hopefully next week we'll be working on something a little bit different to refresh and revitalize those creative juices and get me really thinking again instead of just plonking down grass, trees, and bushes. Thank you so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, drop me a thumbs up. And if you thought it was helpful, please consider sharing it with somebody else. Until I see you next time, keep your engines fired. And of course, stay on track. All the best.